Pro, and today we're going to talk about what taxes you need to pay as a business owner, how you know what taxes you need to pay. This is a really confusing area for a lot of people that come to us as new business owners, and it is very confusing. This is one of the examples of why it's confusing. You type in like common taxes that a small business has to pay into Google, this is what comes up. So you have federal income tax, self-employment tax, employment tax, excise tax, state and local taxes, including sales tax. This isn't necessarily wrong, but it's also not correct. It's not applicable to everybody. So what we're going to do in this video is we're going to determine how you are taxed. And then in a future video, I'm going to explain how you calculate those taxes based on how you're taxed. So essentially what I'm going to do is we're going to determine, are you sole proprietorship? Are you a partnership? Are you an S corporation? Or are you a C corporation? At that point in time, once you've determined what your tax treatment is, then you can go to the video that's applicable to you. That way you don't have to listen through everybody else's video, okay? So let me kind of explain what those structures look like. And then I'm also gonna touch base on a couple of additional taxes that may be applicable to any type of business, okay? The main goal here is I want you to know what taxes you actually need to pay so that you don't fall out of compliance, because a lot of people just don't realize that there is a specific tax that they need to pay, and either they miss filing for that tax when they go to file their tax return, or they go to file their tax return and they weren't prepared for the amount of tax that they end up having to pay. So I'm going to explain to you how to determine how you're taxed, and then some additional taxes that you may be applicable or may be applicable to your business. And then you'll have a separate video to go to in order to determine like how you even pay these taxes. How is that assessed? What you need to be doing, okay? So the way that you are treated for federal income tax and self-employment tax, the first two items on this list, it's going to be determined based on the way that you're treated from a federal tax perspective, okay? That's how we know where your business pays federal income tax and if you are subject to self-employment tax, okay? So it all starts with your legal formation. If you do not have your business legally registered anywhere, so you've just gone into business, you don't have an LLC, you don't have a corporation, anything like that. You've just gone into business. If you have one owner, you are considered a sole proprietorship, okay? You are considered a sole proprietorship. Sole proprietorships pay federal income tax and self-employment tax generally, and that tax is calculated on the owner's Form 1040, okay? So that's a sole proprietorship. Now, if you do not have a formal legal structure like an LLC or a corporation, you have two or more owners, by default you are taxed as a partnership. That partnership files its own tax return, Form 1065, but there is no federal income tax due, generally, with that form. What ends up happening is Form 1065 splits the income and the loss, or income or loss, between the owners, and then that information goes on the owner's personal tax return, where federal income tax and potentially self-employment tax is calculated. Okay? So as a recap, if you have no formal legal structure, if you have one owner, you're a sole proprietorship by default. If you have two or more owners, by default, you are a partnership. Okay? Now, if you are a LLC, same thing. If you are an LLC with one owner, for federal tax purposes, you pay federal income tax and generally self-employment tax. That is calculated on your personal tax return. Okay, it's calculated on your personal tax return. If you are an LLC with two or more owners, by default, you're taxed as a partnership. That partnership files Form 1065. It is an informational only return. there's generally no tax due with that Form 1065. That splits up the income or loss between the partners. And then each partner is going to pay federal income tax and generally self-employment tax on their personal return. Okay? Now, if you have formed a corporation at the state level, if you're registered as a corporation legally, by default, you are taxed as a C corporation. A C corporation files Form 1120. And a C corporation does pay federal income tax. There is not self-employment tax with a C corporation, okay? However, we have a double layer of taxation there. So the C corporation itself files Form 1120. And then if the C corporation pays dividends, the owner or shareholders in that C corporation may pay dividend tax on their personal tax return, okay? It's not subject to self-employment tax. An S corporation is a type of business that you elect into as long as you're eligible. And that S corporation is very similar to a partnership in that it files an informational return to divvy up the income and the loss between the owners. This is Form 1120S. In general, the S Corp does not pay a tax on the federal level. Okay? That information goes down to the shareholders, and the shareholders pay federal income tax. It's not subject to self-employment tax. Okay? Now, so that's how you determine how you're taxed. I will have a video for each of those, so sole proprietorship, partnerships, S corporations, and C corporations. I will have a video for those. Completely separate, so you don't have to sit and listen to somebody else's tax treatment. Let's talk about employment tax. If you have employees, actual W-2 employees, you need to be paying employment tax. And employment tax is going to include the employer portion of FICA, which is Social Security and Medicare. And then the business also withholds taxes from the employees, federal income tax, state income tax if applicable, the employee's portion of FICA, and it remits those items to the IRS or to the state where applicable, or local governments as well. And then employment tax also includes unemployment taxes. Generally, you pay unemployment to the federal government and to the state. Okay? Now, excise tax is on here. Excise tax is a little bit different. I'm going to show you excise tax. You can have federal level excise tax and you can also have state level excise tax. Excise tax is going to be industry dependent. So, you know, this section right here, so this is on the IRS website. This section describes the excise taxes you may have to pay and the forms you have to file if you do any of the following. Manufacture or sell certain products, operate certain kinds of businesses, use various kinds of equipment, facilities, or products, receive payment for certain services. So here's kind of the excise taxes we're talking about. Environmental taxes, communication and air transportation taxes, fuel taxes, tax on the first retail sale of heavy trucks, trailers, and tractors, manufacturers' taxes on the sale and use of a variety of different articles. So this goes through the different types of taxes that you may be subject to based on your industry. Excise taxes are industry specific. So not all businesses are subject to excise taxes. You might be subject to excise tax. I'm not going to go through this just because it's very industry specific and you'll need to look in based on your industry, determine if you're subject to any of these. So excise tax is one. State and local taxes. So state and local taxes are a little bit different. Some states have no income tax at all for businesses or for individuals. There's just no income tax. Some states have, maybe business taxes, but not individual taxes. Some states will charge a fee for having states or businesses operate in that state. So just be aware of what your state and local requirements are. I'm not going to go through that just because we don't have time for 50 states to discuss 50 states. But if you have any questions, let me know. One of the common items, though, that we see is sales tax. So sales tax is a very common tax that businesses are subject to. Sales tax takes place on the state level or potentially like local. Generally, it's like there's a percentage based on county. Sales tax varies in different states. And what a lot of people don't realize is if you're selling across state lines, you may need to pay sales tax in multiple different states. Okay, I will go have a separate video on sales tax, but sales tax is something that a lot of businesses are subject to. One of the easiest ways to determine if you are subject to sales tax is to figure out what states you're selling in and then go to the state websites. Okay, if you're like, I can't do that, I am selling in so many different states, that would take me forever. I totally get that. There are a couple of resources. Let me pull one up for you. TaxJar, and I'm not guaranteeing that these are accurate, but TaxJar is one that can help you with sales tax, okay? If you go here at taxjar.com, you can go to resources, and you can look up sales tax by state, okay? And I'm going to go over this in a completely different video, so you don't have to know it all right now. But these states have, you'll see here, all the green states, there's a statewide sales tax. The blue states, there's no statewide sales tax, but some local areas have a tax. And then the gray states, there's no sales tax, okay? So this will give you kind of an idea. There's thresholds that you have to reach in many states before you start paying sales tax. But if you're planning on doing like an e-commerce site where you're selling all across the U.S., you can really get yourself in a lot of trouble with sales tax. So I definitely recommend checking out the sales tax video that we'll be posting, because that can be a little not fun to deal with. Okay, so in summary, the way that you are paying federal income tax on your business income is dependent on how you are set up for tax purposes. If you are either not formally registered in your state or you are formally registered as an LLC, by default, if you have one owner, your tax is a sole proprietorship. If you have two or more owners, by default, your tax is a partnership. Okay? If you are a corporation, you're considered by default a C corporation. S corporations are an election that you make at the federal level. I just need you to know how you're actually taxed. And then go check out the video that is tailored to that specific tax treatment. Okay? In addition to federal income tax and self-employment tax, you may need to pay employment tax, some form of excise tax, and potentially taxes like sales tax. Okay? The business itself may have income tax on the state or local level. So I am going to go ahead and switch over to explaining on a tax treatment basis. So like I'll have a video for sole proprietorships, partnerships, S corporations, and C corporations. If you have any questions, let me know. And then if you could do me a favor and like and subscribe, it helps us make more content for you guys. Content that you don't have to pay for because YouTube pays. If you have any questions, let me know, and I will see you guys in the next video.